I was at my desk enjoying a mid-morning coffee that my assistant brought me, though she used artificial sugar. I threatened to switch to black tea instead. I was thinking about a copyright issue that needed immediate resolution, but the federal government was delaying the release of sensitive material. They were slow as usual, making it hard to get anything done. Federal employees showed extreme incompetence, avoiding responsibility without direct orders. I wondered how many people handled a letter before action was taken. I was stuck, unable to move on to my next project, and facing financial loss if items had to be destroyed. The rise of liberal concerns had complicated simple matters, even changing job titles. I felt too old for this nonsense. "There's a young lady here to see you," said Jackie Stoddard, entering my office. "She wouldn't give her name, but handed me this picture." As I looked at the photo, dread filled me. Son of a cow, I thought. Why now? It was a picture of Sharon, my ex, and me on our wedding day, taken 18 years ago. It reminded me of the pain, cheating, and tears. People assumed I had returned to lick my wounds, and they were right. Back then, I didn't understand money or power, but I had changed since. "Ask her if she's Susan or Sandra Press," I said, handing Jackie a USB drive and a Ziploc bag. "If she is, show her the video on this. If she wants a copy, give her everything and return the original to me. Come back afterward, and I'll answer your questions." At 42, I embraced bachelorhood. My short marriage to Sharon Grace McCormick had ruined my trust. Now people had to earn it, which was hard. I stood 6'4" with a 38-inch waist, weighing 200 pounds. I worked out at the gym for 2 hours after work. My brownish-black hair was graying slightly, and I still turned heads. I had a few casual relationships, but marriage and love were not for me. About an hour later, Jackie returned, leaving the door open. She explained that the young lady still had many questions. She sat down, her serious face showing she wouldn't leave without answers. Looking at me with her emerald eyes, she waited for me to speak. "Do you know which one it was?" "Sandra," she replied. "Who is she, and why was she so shocked?" She cried, saying, "We've been lied to all our lives. If my heart's right, he was lied to as well." "Sandra is one of a pair of identical twins. The clip you saw was her mother's last words to me before our first divorce hearing, 7 months before the twins were born. I found out about them through friends and wasn't informed she was pregnant. The rest of the items on the stick detail what would happen if I contacted them. Her father, then with the CIA, got me fired from the FBI with false charges because he hated me. The documents imply there's a contract on my life if I interfere with them. He was a powerful, dangerous man. She divorced me to marry my former best friend, with whom she'd been having an affair for months. As far as I know, he's their natural father." "How did she find me, and what does she want?" "Sandra found an old picture in their attic with your name on it, Googled you, and recognized you. She also found the original marriage certificate and divorce papers. She tracked you down through Facebook and other web searches. She came to find a bone marrow match for her twin sister who is running out of time." "Why come to me? I'm not their father. It doesn't make sense," I replied. "Her mother was with her father months before I knew her. Her father ensured that. Sandra suspected something and convinced doctors to run a DNA test during the bone marrow test. Mr. Press isn't their biological father." "What do you think?" Jackie's expression turned into a big smile as tears formed in my eyes. If Sandra was right, it meant my ex had lied to me all those years ago. I wondered if I might be their father. "I knew she was related to you the moment I saw her," Jackie said, standing up. "She has a look that makes it clear." "Are you ready for perhaps the biggest shock in years, Jackie? Send the information on the stick to my publishers. Tell them to release it in a way that can't be traced back to me and not to disclose my writing name because my life might still be at risk. Stress that it needs to be made public quickly. Then find someone to do a fast DNA test and set up an appointment. If I am their father, I want proof when I confront their mother. If it's true, I need a litigation lawyer to fight for my parental rights. Clear my schedule. I need to go to Susan's hospital ASAP," I said. "Now I've got to find Sandra." "Sandra, come in and introduce yourself," Jackie called. Sandra walked in, and the moment I saw her, I knew. She looked just like my younger sister at 16. I choked up, overwhelmed with emotion. Sandra and I both started crying. Jackie took a few pictures with her phone to capture this life-changing moment, and then left us alone. "Sandra and you have an appointment for blood testing at 1. They promised a rush job, and I charged it to the corporate card," Jackie said when she returned. "I also arranged for you to meet your sister Barbara at Kuntel's at 3 and reserved a private table. Sandra needs to see what we do. Barbara will make sure her kids are taken care of. She knows you have important family news." I stood there, emotional and unsure, watching Sandra walk towards me. I had so many questions. I hugged her tightly as Jackie closed the door. It was hard to grasp that I might be a dad. Sandra seemed to feel the same, trembling as we left my office. We tried to keep things light, taking baby steps to figure everything out. After arranging for the clinic to email the report, we headed out for a late lunch. I learned that Sandra had skipped school and driven all day until she had to rest at a station. I was furious that she would do something so risky, but held my tongue, realizing I might be reacting like an overprotective dad. It also reminded me of something I would have done at her age. When we arrived at Cantel's, I noticed Barb's car. "I know we're here to meet your sister, but why did Jackie set this up without talking to you first?" Sandra asked. "You're about to see what Jackie and I saw when we first met you," I replied. "It will explain why we believe you and Susan are my daughters and why I was shocked when the test came back positive." "Can I call you Dad?" Sandra asked. I laughed and smiled. "I'd love that." Cantel's was a family restaurant, a step up from Red Lobster with an excellent reputation. The owner and hostess led us to our private booth immediately. I ordered a bottle of champagne and extra tissues. Barbara had her back to us, so I asked Sandra to wait while I approached. "Hi, sis. Thanks for meeting me," I said. Barbara looked up and said, "You look happy. What's going on?" "Barbara, stand up. There's someone I want you to meet," I said as Sandra approached. "This is Sharon's daughter, Sandra." Barbara turned and stared, looking like she saw a younger version of herself. They had similar features: long brunette hair, high cheekbones, small ears, light blue eyes, and warm smiles. "Oh my God!" Barb exclaimed. "Paul, you should have warned me. This is unbelievable. How long have you known about her?" "About 5 hours," Sandra said emotionally. I surprised him at his office. Jackie and Dad knew immediately. "Seeing you, I understand why." The server returned with tissues and understood why we needed privacy. Barbara, between tears, explained 3 more people would join us, so the hostess moved us to a larger table. Barbara called her husband to join us and notified our parents to come quickly, calling it a family emergency. Mom asked what was wrong, but Barbara said she couldn't explain. We were all emotional. I got a text from Jackie saying the publisher had released the information, and it would be on the 6 o'clock news. We had just calmed down after our first glass of champagne when Barb's husband and my parents arrived. I laughed hearing my dad's loud voice. "There better be a good reason for this." Barbara and I stood to greet them. "Mom, Dad, Lou, I'd like to introduce you to Sharon's daughter, Sandra Press," Barbara said proudly. My mother instantly recognized the resemblance and smiled widely, filled with pride. She finally had the granddaughter she always wanted. My dad was stunned, speechless for once. When he finally spoke, he said, "I see it, but it's hard to believe." My mom sat beside Sandra, holding her hand tightly, too emotional to speak. My dad ordered 2 more bottles of champagne, his pride evident. After our glasses were refilled, I stood up with mine. "I need to explain," I said as Sandra started recording with my phone. I shared how we met and what had happened that day. My dad then stood up. "Sandra, we don't need a DNA test to confirm what we already know. Welcome to our family. You have 2 more aunts to meet soon. Promise us you'll always consider this family your home." Sandra took the phone and spoke. "I came here seeking the truth, not knowing what I'd find. Today has changed everything for Dad and me. We didn't know until now. Meeting Aunt Barb showed me what unconditional love is. My twin sister Susan will feel the same." I scanned the table as everyone became emotional. Even my father, who never cried, had tears in his eyes. My mom held up 2 fingers, crying louder. I captured everyone's joyful tears before stopping the recording. Sandra added her and her sister's info to my contacts and texted Susan, showing me the video she sent. Sandra's message read, "If what we think is true, the DNA test will confirm. Watch the 6 o'clock news. Love, your twin." My mother asked if she was still in disbelief. Sandra showed her photos of Susan and herself. My mom demanded copies for her laptop, displaying them on the full screen for all to see. Sandra then turned off her phone and put it back in her purse, making me realize no one knew where she was. My phone rang. It was Susan. I stood up and walked away to answer it. My dad noticed me tearing up and looked at me questioningly. Sandra mouthed, "It's my sister." My dad nodded, understanding, and I answered the call. "Hello, this is Susan. After seeing the video, I had to call," she said. "Mom won't be home until at least 7 because she's stopping at the police station for an update on Sandra." I'm pretending to know nothing. The police were here earlier and left their card. Any ideas on what I should do? Get him to watch the 6 o'clock news and pay attention to what's revealed about me. Tell him you'll talk when your parents aren't around and show him the video. Give him my number and ask him to text first before calling. He'll understand after watching the news, I replied. Once we have the DNA proof, Sandra and I might bring the whole family. What do you mean? Susan asked. After explaining Sandra's actions to help you, the family will spread the word. I don't know how many will come, but those who can will, I explained. Why? She asked. Family, I said. In the Patterson family, blood is thicker than water. If I'm not a match, someone else might be. Just like that? Susan asked, doubtful. No doubt, you'll see, I said with a chuckle. We are strangers after all. We talked a bit more before saying goodbye, and she replied with relieved sobs. After ordering dinner, I explained to the family why Sandra was here. Immediately, cell phones started buzzing, calling others to spread the word and gather potential matches. My mother took charge of organizing everything. Sandra, how did you get here? My father asked. I drove my old 1994 Voyager van. It's one step up from a rent-a-wreck, she laughed. It's in Dad's parking lot. Son, take that van to my dealership in the morning. She's not driving back in that. It's a miracle she made it here, my dad said firmly. At her age, you had as much sense as she does. She's determined. What do you plan to give her? I asked. She can pick one out, he replied with a wink and a smile. If I could choose, it would be a 4x4. I love the outdoors, Sandra said. My dad responded with a big grin because we all loved the outdoors. If the weather allowed, we were fishing, camping, or hunting. He started reminiscing about the summer I learned to water ski in barefoot, sharing as many stories like he was holding court. Both my parents insisted that Sandra stay with them for the night, agreeing it wouldn't look right for us to be alone. After dinner, Dad drove them to her vehicle and then drove it home. My mother was thrilled, already planning to spoil her new granddaughter. Dad ended up waiting until 1 a.m. for them to get home. Around 10 p.m., the police investigator called me. It took him 2 hours to complete a background check on me. The media was buzzing with questions about the information I released. We discussed the situation and related problems. Seeing the 3 generations in the video had answered many of his questions. I told him we were rushing DNA tests to confirm our relationship and that Sandra was with my parents. Once confirmed, we would return to see if I could be a match for Susan. I asked him to buy us some time and promised to update him on our progress. Susan later told me he reported back to her about our discussion. I was confronting my past again, but with a new perspective. This time, I wouldn't be intimidated by my ex-wife's family's power and money. I would use the media, the courts, and the truth to my advantage. I had the resources, the proof, and a growing determination. I didn't seek revenge, just justice through the truth. I was ready to take on 4 people and the federal government. The next morning, I was in my office, ensuring any schedule changes wouldn't affect me much, and setting up tasks for Jackie while I was gone. Jackie kept checking the email accounts like an overprotective mother, questioning me about my day and extracting all the details she could. To be honest, I never tired of looking at Jackie Stoddard. In her youth, she must have been every teenage boy's dream. Her naturally styled brown hair accentuated her soft features, and her piercing emerald green eyes and full lips were still captivating. As a single man, I often admired her, but was thankful she never caught me looking. Finally, she received the DNA test results, printed them, and exclaimed, "It's confirmed! You are her father!" Jackie immediately called the lab to send the information to Susan's specialist and began searching for the toughest litigation lawyer in New York. After vetting a few, she selected the best and arranged a Skype chat. The lawyer agreed to work on a percentage basis, confident it was a slam dunk with the DNA proof. We would go after my ex-wife, her husband, and her parents for denying me my parental rights. The restrictive court order against me would be squashed, proving their deliberate actions. The supposed contract on my life, even if not factual, would demonstrate their attempts to intimidate and control. The lawyer saw the potential for a significant case, even before involving the government. I told Jackie to send a gray, dust-covered box from the safe to my new lawyer. It contained legal proof that Sharon's father had tried to destroy my career and marriage. It had taken years to collect this evidence through various government levels. I later learned that the police officer had released the video, turning the story into a runaway daughter finding her biological dad to save her sister's life, causing a media frenzy. "Mom, it's confirmed," I said on the phone. "I'm a father twice over. Thank God. Be ready to leave tomorrow at 7 a.m. from the car lot. I'll spread the news. Have you called your daughters? Mom asked. We were now on the road, driving a fully loaded 2-year-old Ford Explorer to Oswego, New York. Sandra and I led the way with my parents in a tour bus and 33 other vehicles following. The tribe was on its way when my phone rang. Sandra answered and put it on speaker. You're being tracked by CNN, Susan said after our greetings. There's a tour bus with a sign saying the Carlsons are coming. 1 out of 141 should be a match. Well, we have the DNA test proving he's our father. I've got a new 2-year-old Ford Explorer, Sandra replied. Dad said, if it was confirmed, a lot of family would come, but I never expected this, Susan explained. It's given me a new hope I never imagined. I can't remember feeling this good. Dad's family spread the word and people came out of the woodwork. I met so many relatives this morning. It will take multiple introductions to remember their names. I met first, second, and even third cousins. I'm so proud I want to change my last name to Carlson, Sandra stated. I never knew families like this existed. I was so overwhelmed I almost went off the road. That's when I decided to write this amazing experience into my next book. My daughters were still talking about Sandra's experiences when Susan said she had to go. Her mother had just entered the room. Dad, are you okay? Sandra asked with concern. I saw you get very emotional. How do you expect me to feel? I discovered I have 2 daughters raised by my ex-wife and a former friend without my knowledge. One is vibrant and full of life. The other is on the verge of dying. One is so strong and independent she moved mountains without thinking, just like I would. And she wants to take my name, I replied with pride. Emotionally overwhelmed, Sandra replied. I was so focused on saving my sister's life. I didn't think about the impact on you. I wasn't a good match because I inherited a defective gene from our mother. The emotional problems I've caused will be felt for days. Can you forgive me? For what? Coming into my life? Turning everything upside down? No, that's what living is about. You've given everyone another person to love. You've given me a chance to be a real dad, I said through tears. Your grandparents adore you. My mother is so proud. Seeing her face in you means everything. You and your sister have become her favorites by birthright. She's been spoiling us. We went shopping, and if she bought me an outfit, she got one for Sue, too. She laughed, saying she had years of spoiling to catch up on. That's Mom. You'll find it impossible to distance her from you. I know, I've tried, I said. Barb and my sisters will brag about this for weeks. By the end, this will become a family legend shared for years. We learned that as soon as Sharon saw the live news feed about our arrival, she began having severe panic attacks. The walls she had built were crumbling. Susan, feeling vibrant and strong, confronted her as soon as she turned off her phone. Mom, why did you hide the truth about our real dad? Susan asked. When she got no answer, she pressed harder. You hid the truth from us, made decisions about our lives. What gave you the right to play God? Even Dad didn't know. If Sandra hadn't found out about him and sought the truth, would you have let me die? Sharon had no answers, never expecting the truth to come out. Her father had hated Paul from the start and did everything to drive him away. Thankfully, Susan's doctor walked in at that moment. We received DNA from a man we didn't know, proving he is Susan's biological father. He is coming to be tested, and there's a good chance he's a bone marrow match. He should be here tomorrow afternoon, and for his protection, he'll be under guard, the doctor said before leaving. Mom, my bio dad is coming with 140 others in case he's not a match. He wants to give me a fighting chance, Susan stated. He's risking his life to help me. Why? Sharon asked. To him and his family, blood is thicker than water. Though I'm a stranger to them, I am family, and family comes first, she replied. You had to know we look like our real dad's mother. Watch this video. It proves everything. Sharon watched the video of my family meeting Sandra. There was no doubt. 3 generations shared the same face. She could no longer deny the truth. Her daughters had proof, and her husband's actions were backfiring. Then a man appeared at Susan's room entrance asking for Sharon. When she admitted she was Sharon Press, he handed her a large legal envelope saying, You have been served. Sharon fell to her knees, sobbing. Susan, furious, felt no pity. Mom, why did Grandpa put a contract on my bio dad's life? Susan asked, knowing she wouldn't get an answer. Arnold Franklin Press had just left a corporate meeting. As he walked down the hall, he was served with legal papers. He sat down in the reception area to read them. The first document was a lawsuit against him and his wife for denying Paul his legal rights as the father of his daughters. The second was against his in-laws and himself, accusing them of conspiring to ruin Paul's marriage and career. It was clear Paul was seeking revenge. demanding sole custody of his daughters. He argued that if Sandra hadn't found him, he would never have known about them. He claimed moral abandonment, suggesting Sharon and Arnold would have let Susan die to keep their secrets. Proving otherwise in court would be difficult given the media coverage. Arnold remembered when he and Paul were university roommates and football teammates. Both had pursued Sharon, but Paul won her over. Arnold had even been the best man at their wedding. However, Sharon's father never approved of Paul due to his background. He convinced Arnold to pursue Sharon, and Arnold agreed. With her father's influence, Paul was kept busy with FBI assignments, leaving Sharon and Arnold alone together. Eventually, Sharon and Arnold became lovers while Paul was undercover for 2 months. Her father had recorded their affair and confronted Paul with the evidence when he returned. Sharon, unaware she was pregnant, thought her missed periods were due to stress. Delighted, her father saw Paul file for divorce immediately. When the twins were born, they knew Paul was the father, but her father had already gotten Paul fired with false charges. It took Paul 4 years to clear his name, during which he left the area in disgrace. Meanwhile, Sharon and Arnold married and had 2 sons. The unedited tapes would prove the conspiracy between Sharon's father and Arnold to break up the marriage. Arnold now wondered how Sharon would react when this truth came out. Sandra, I, and the group arrived at our final stop of the night around 9, exhausted after 14 hours of driving. We ordered a light meal to our rooms and quickly fell asleep until the 5 a.m. wake-up call. Sandra and I left early because I had a secret meeting with the police officer and an FBI representative. The rest of the group left at 7 for the 6-hour drive. Sandra dropped me off at the Oswego Police Department, where I met Detective Peter Rogers and FBI agent Chad Girardeau. We discussed my former father-in-law's questioning for over an hour and a half. I provided my lawyer's contact information and left a USB stick with all my evidence. I was placed under official protection until I left town. With a security escort, I was taken to the hospital for a blood draw to see if I could be a bone marrow match. As I approached Susan's private room, I heard Sandra and Susan talking. The hospital staff recognized me by my writing name, and I signed a book for one of the nurses. I walked into Susan's room. "Dad," Sandra said in surprise. "I didn't expect you so soon." "Susan, this is our dad, Paul Carlson." Susan looked frail, her skin loose and her face reflecting the closeness of end of life. Despite this, her smile was wide and her eyes were bright with hope. "Susan, they're rushing the test. It should be done in 30 minutes. The rest of the family is checking into their hotels. My parents are having their bone marrow drawn now and will meet you soon. If there's more than one match, the doctor plans to do a double transplant simultaneously in both arms," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. Susan broke down in tears. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her until she calmed down. Sandra captured a photo of us both crying tears of joy and relief. She was glowing with pride, and rightly so. I realized how much she had done, and I was overwhelmed seeing my 2 daughters together for the first time. "Grandma, Grandpa, come in and meet my sister," Sandra said. The 5 of us talked for over an hour until Susan's doctor entered smiling. My mother and I were perfect matches for Susan. Dr. Proctor asked if we were ready to be checked in for surgery at 6 a.m. the next day. We both agreed. My dad whispered, "Thank God." We prayed for a miracle all the way up. "Don't you need my parents' permission?" Susan asked. "Normally, yes, but we received a court order this morning thanks to Mr. Carlson. It allows us to proceed if he or a relative is a match. The judge agreed that your mother and her husband weren't putting your needs first," Dr. Proctor explained. "Mr. Carlson will cover all costs not covered by insurance." Sandra smiled. "I'm not surprised, sis. With what Mom and Arnold did, Dad had no choice. Legally, he had no rights, so he used the courts to prevent any delay. A security guard then informed us we were about to be on national news. Susan turned the TV to CNN, which revealed my identity as the author of a popular book series worth an estimated $40 million. Sandra, Susan, and the doctor were amazed. My parents looked at me in shock. They had no idea, thinking I was just an independent corporate financial advisor. "My God, Dad," Susan said. "I've read all your books. They're great." I laughed. After my former life was destroyed, I had to reinvent myself. Writing was my therapy. The first book's success was a turning point, and it grew from there. I keep my books current, exposing the raw truth about world situations, societal views, and morals, whether people like it or not. For the first time in 15 years, I checked into a hospital, along with my mom. My new daughter wanted to share a room with me, but the hospital's security wouldn't allow it. Sandra spent the evening running between 3 different rooms. My dad called some relatives to update them. Sharon and Arnold weren't pleased when they arrived after work. Their attitude was met with coldness. Susan told them she was being prepped for surgery and would receive a double bone marrow transplant in the morning due to a court order. "How?" Sharon asked. "Mom, Arnold, my bio-dad and his mother are perfect matches. Both are donating so I can get a double dose and recover fully," Susan said. "Mom, do you know who Jason Blackstone is? He's your favorite author." "Well, Jason Blackstone is a pen name for Paul Earl Carlson, my bio-dad." Sharon and Arnold turned pale. They had hoped the court case would disappear, but Paul's net worth showed he wasn't after money. He wanted justice. Paul always believed in law and order, which made him a successful agent until his termination. "Mom, did you know your father has been in FBI custody all day? You might want to check with Grandma to see if he's home. Can you explain why this is happening? Sandra and I want to know," Susan said with a big smile. "Sandra's somewhere in the hospital, either in Dad's room or Grandma Patterson's if you want to see her." Sandra and I were in my hospital room discussing how she would handle her mother when Sharon found her. A security guard knocked and poked his head in. "Mr. Carlson, do you know a Jackie Stoddard?" I said, "Yes." He opened the door and Jackie came in. Jackie had been my sidekick for 10 years. I had supported her through her divorce after her husband got his assistant pregnant. She was now 35 and a single mother, still adjusting to single life, but still wore her wedding diamond. My family and I loved her, and I often wondered why she hadn't found someone. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I'm here to do what I always do. Look after you. Dr. Proctor said you'd be here for at least 3 days and suspected you were a match. Your arm will take a week to heal enough for light activities. I booked a private jet and a hotel using the corporate card," Jackie explained. Sandra texted me, "Dad, FYI, she loves you. She couldn't stay away." I raised my eyebrow. The guard poked his head in. "Sharon and Arnold Press want to see you. Will you allow them in?" "Only after they've been searched," Jackie said. "What's your relationship with Mr. Carlson?" the security officer asked. "I'm his fiancé. Didn't you see my ring?" Jackie replied. Sandra winked at me and mouthed, "Told ya." I laughed. As Sharon and Arnold entered, Sandra spoke. "Dad, I wouldn't trust these two for a moment," she said. "They're just trying to cover their backs." "You don't know the half of it, Sandra," Jackie began. "Your dad's lawyer has video showing your stepfather receiving a check from your grandfather as payment to break your parents' marriage. If successful, he would manage your grandparents' finances for a 3% annual fee." "How do you know this is true?" Sharon asked. "And who are you?" "Mom, she's Dad's fiancée and a master researcher. Her name is Jackie Stoddard. I trust her more than you," Sandra said firmly. Sharon's face went white. Her daughters were distancing themselves from her, and there was nothing she could do. "Jackie speaks the truth, Sharon," I explained. "I ordered my lawyer to release all the video and audio tapes to the FBI, including a letter from your father admitting he paid for the recordings. Your father's hatred for me was so great, he didn't care about the cost or who he used to get what he wanted." "Is this true?" Sharon asked Arnold. Seeing his expression, she knew it was. Sharon realized what she lost when I divorced her, the only man who truly loved her. "Jackie, a word of advice. Don't let others manipulate you like I did. Paul, I want to talk to you alone after the surgery. Right now, I need to go home and reflect. Sandra, will you walk with me to my car?" Sharon asked. Sandra said, "I'll be back soon. Mom and I need to settle a few things. Jackie, watch over Dad till I return." We watched them leave. Sharon held it together until she exited, then started to cry. Both Jackie and I understood she had no idea what had been done until now. Arnold, born with a silver spoon, was paralyzed by fear. The truth had come out and their life was shattered. Sharon would never trust him again. "Paul, I dreaded this day. I thought you'd never return. If we had met accidentally, I could have brushed it off," Arnold stated. "I never saw this happening. It's best I leave and say no more." He left, leaving us alone. I looked at Jackie, making her blush for the first time. I was looking at her the way a man in love should. For once, I was opening myself up. Was she playing me? Was she finally admitting her true feelings? Did I love her as a friend or something more? Either way, my daughters had awakened me. I'd been living in others' shadows, finding joy in their excitement instead of creating my own. "Jackie, we have a lot to discuss while I'm in recovery," I said softly. "These last few days have awakened me. I got complacent, settling for the sidelines instead of being in the game. Paul, when I got divorced, you stepped in. My kids were still young. You've been more of a dad to them than their own father. From baseball games to father-daughter dances, you were always there. I know why you pay me well, more than the usual rate. You want to ensure the kids in your heart are looked after, Jackie said. On their birthdays, you always went overboard, making them the envy of their friends. During summer breaks, you took us on special trips, creating lifelong memories. You answer their questions like a father should. They love you, and you love them. Your only problem is your fear of commitment. I tried to speak, but couldn't. Jackie was right, and her words hit me hard. So did Sandra's. I walked over to Jackie and sat beside her, taking her hand. I looked into her eyes, gathering my thoughts. Sharon cheated me. Her father's power intimidated me. My best friend betrayed me. I lived with an ongoing threat on my life. I put myself in protection mode. Until a few days ago, I didn't realize it. Now that I have, can we go on our first actual date? Or is it too late for you and me? I asked. Took you long enough, you old fool, Jackie said before kissing me. I'm texting our kids to tell them we're now a couple and working things out. Pretty sure of yourself, I said. I texted Sandra, thanking her and asking if everything was okay. Sandra responded, Mom didn't know. She's taking it hard. Won't be back tonight. Let Susan know. Jackie and I went up to Susan's room. After introducing Jackie as my girlfriend, we told her what had happened earlier and showed her Sandra's text. We had just finished when my sister Barbara entered. I just had to meet her, Barbara said. Jackie, what are you doing here? I want to say something. But Barb figured it out. He finally clued in, didn't he? She said with a smile. Took him long enough. Susan, this is your Aunt Barbara, and the man entering is your Uncle Lou, Barbara's husband, I said. You'll soon learn we speak our minds, like it or not. I excused myself and went to the nurse's station, texting Sandra to ask about Susan's pizza preferences. She replied that Susan likes everything but anchovies. I ordered 3 extra-large pizzas and 3 2-liter colas for quick delivery. I also called Dad, asking him to bring Mom up in 30 minutes for a pizza party. We pushed the no eating for 8 hours rule, but got carried away. The head nurse came in to calm us down, but left with a slice of pizza. Later, she stopped me and said, Your actions lifted the spirits of the whole floor. I can't thank you enough. At 4 a.m., they took me and my mom to prepare for the operation. We supported each other until we were wheeled in. I stayed awake until the medication kicked in. When I awoke, it was done. Now came the waiting and praying. Dr. Proctor informed everyone that the bone marrow transfer went well, but it would take a few hours to see if it took. It did. Hearing this, most of the family started preparing to go home. Jackie, I said, is the worst patient ever. But I'm not sick, I replied. You're like a bull in a china shop, impatient, unruly, and miserable. Keep it up and you'll get a bad reputation, Jackie told me. Jackie said my mother was doing well. Once she was sure I was stable, she gave me my phone back. The first texts I saw were from Jackie's kids, both asking, When does she get her engagement ring, Dad? When do we meet our new sisters? Jackie, your kids are smart, I said, showing her the phone. I told them I was coming to Oswego to watch over you. After the operation, they had a lot of questions and the whole story came out. They weren't surprised. They said, Mom, he's always treated us like his own. Most of our friends wish their dads were like him. We've always seen him as our dad, Jackie explained. She read the note and looked at me with tears in her eyes. I guess we'll have a short engagement, I said with a smile. Have you heard from the twins? Sandra and her mother are with Susan. She's doing well considering everything. Even though she's still medicated, she's asking a lot of questions, Jackie disclosed. Sandra told her about the pizza party. Susan can't get over how much she looks like her aunt and grandmother. She can't wait for a girl's day out with them when she recovers. Find me my pants. I want to see her myself and then check on Mom, I said. The nurses tried to stop me, saying it was too soon after surgery, but I insisted. So off we went, holding hands. Surprisingly, my pain was manageable. Jackie and I noticed Susan's improvement immediately. Her complexion was better, and the sparkle in her eyes almost brought tears to mine. Who are Tammy and Timothy Stoddard? Sandra asked. My children, ages 13 and 11. Why? Jackie replied. I got a Facebook friend request from them this morning. So did Susan, Sandra said. You both need to read what they sent me, I said, handing Sandra my phone. She read it, smiled, and passed it to Susan. I want this back to add their phone numbers to my contacts, I said. Sharon then asked if she could talk to me privately, so we went to the waiting room. Paul, I had a long talk with my mother last night. She admitted remembering Dad's hate towards you, but never expected this. My daughters want to finish the school year here and then live with you. They want their last name changed to yours and feel what Arnold and I did is unforgivable, Sharon disclosed. I can't argue with them. They made it clear they'll go to court if I refuse. They no longer trust me, and I can't blame them. Will you let them come? You know my family. They wouldn't let me refuse no matter how I felt. I will gladly take them. So will Jackie. We'll just need a bigger place. I'll drop the suit against you if you agree to joint custody, I replied. The suit will still go forward against the rest of your family. The twins are old enough to decide the rest. Sharon agreed to joint custody. I offered to pay for their name change, but she declined. We walked back into Susan's room together. The girls watched us intently. Jackie, it looks like we're going to need at least a 6-bedroom house, I said. Jackie smiled, and the girls screamed with delight. Sharon said, Girls, your father and I agree. You get your wishes if Jackie agrees. I'll call the lawyer tomorrow to start the legal process for your name change. Paul, Jackie asked, are you ready for this? A house with teenage kids? No one is ever ready, but we'll adapt. I'm just getting used to the idea of 2 carrying my name, I said. Make that 4. Tam and Tim want you to adopt them. They're already signing their names as Carlson. Jackie said, Call Roger Mouser's firm to start the paperwork. Then text the kids to let them know our plans. Let's find out which area has the best schools so we know where to look for our new home. Sandra picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and made a call on speaker. Hello, Tammy said. Who are you, and what do you want? This is Sandra, your soon-to-be older sister. Is Timothy with you? Sandra explained. Can you prove it? Because I can't, Tammy said. Dad taught us not to take calls or messages from unknown sources without proof. Seriously, are you scamming me? Tammy, Paul and I are getting married, Jackie said. You were talking to Paul's daughter, Sandra. We're all going to be Carlsons. Susan and I are changing our last name, and your dad and I have started the process for him to adopt you and change your name to Carlson too, Sandra added. Sweet. Let Dad know it's about time. How is Susan? Timothy replied. We've been waiting to hear. Jackie and I exchanged a look, witnessing the first conversation of our blended family. She squeezed my hand in support. I am improving, Susan said. So far, so good. I'll text you both so you can add my number. Susan, Sandra, our dad is the only father we've known. Our bio dad was gone before we knew him. Your dad has been better than any of our friends' parents. Mom's been in love with him for a long time. When we get together, we need you to accept that we're all siblings, nothing more, nothing less. Tammy and I won't let anything come between them, Timothy said firmly. Both of my daughters agreed. Jackie, with tear-filled eyes, said, They're showing your morals and standards. You should be proud they took your values to heart. I was. We said goodbye for now and headed to see my mom. Dad was with her when we walked in, taking them by surprise. My dad saw a look from Jackie that made him smile. He knew something was up. Mom, I said, you're up and about already. Have you seen Susan? How does she look? Her complexion is improving and her spirits are up, so it's looking good, but it's still too early to tell, I replied. We need to have a serious talk if you both have the time. We're not going anywhere, so let's get to it, my dad responded. Susan and Sandra will live with me after the school year. They'll change their last name to ours, I said. Sharon agreed to joint custody and the name change. It was the twins' idea. That's wonderful, both my parents said. That's not all, Jackie added. Your son has decided to make an honest woman out of me. Elizabeth, are you ready to help plan a wedding? My mom got teary-eyed, and my dad had a big smile. They didn't have to say they approved, we knew. I will be adopting Tammy and Timothy, and they will take my last name. Also, Jackie and I will start house hunting as soon as we get back, I added. What got your head out of your back? My dad asked. We all knew how you both felt about each other. I've been trying to get your mother's approval to knock some sense into you. Earl Carlson, behave yourself. You're not at the yard selling a car, Mom said. Jackie, have you thought about your wedding plans? We haven't discussed it much, but since we're blending 3 families, it should be a family affair. Barb can be my maid of honor, Lou Paul's best man, his brothers-in-law as ushers, Susan and Sandra as bridesmaids, Tammy as the flower girl, and Timothy as the ring bearer. Dad, will you walk me down the aisle with my father? Jackie said with a grin. Depends on who's paying the bill and if the 19th hole is stocked with Jack Daniels, Dad replied, laughing. What do you think, Paul? Jackie asked. It's perfect. It will unite us all. If that's what you want, let's do it, I replied. Should we invite Sharon? Both my parents firmly said no. Mom, Dad, in the next few weeks, the media will reveal a lot. I'm suing the federal government, Sharon's parents, and her husband. I believe Sharon was as much a sufferer as I was. I paid the price years ago, and now Sharon is paying in ways we can only imagine. She thinks she's lost her daughters forever, I explained. Inviting her might help the twins and her forge a new relationship and move on from the past. Jackie and my parents looked at me in awe. Where did that wisdom come from? My dad asked seriously. These last few days have taught me a lot, I replied, holding Jackie's hand. Sandra's arrival made me grasp life again. We returned to my room, and I quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the surgery. Jackie stayed by my side and watched the news. Christopher McCormick and Arnold Press had been arrested for lying to the FBI. The person behind the contract on my life turned state's evidence. My lawyer released details of my firing from the FBI, prompting an internal review. When I woke up, Jackie filled me in. Dr. Proctor informed us that my mother and I would be released the next day. You'll need follow-ups and to get your stitches removed, he said. Susan is doing better than expected. The big question is how she'll respond as she's weaned off her meds. We talked to my parents, who decided not to leave the city until Susan was on the road to recovery. They would fly back with us on the private plane. Dad booked into the same hotel as Jackie, and the bus driver was instructed to head back. Over the next few days, the media exposed the deception, backstabbing, and political deals that ruined my marriage and career. They spent a day discussing how Sharon's father manipulated her into believing the rumors and lies. Sharon was publicly dissected like a frog. Jackie and I were headed to visit Susan one last time before going home. Dr. Proctor had proudly said she was on the road to a full recovery. Someone must have disliked the negative press about the Fed's past dealings with me, because the security release my publisher and I were waiting for was granted. Over 1 million hard copies would be released to the market within 2 weeks. I had 2 first editions delivered overnight. After I signed them, Jackie wrapped them, and we hid them in a shopping bag. We made sure Sandra would be there when we entered Susan's room. Your dad and I have set the wedding date for the first weekend in August. Aunt Barbara will be my maid of honor. I was wondering if you two would be my bridesmaids, Jackie asked. Susan exclaimed, "Hell yes. Jackie, when I first walked into Dad's office, I was scared stiff. You recognized me immediately and said, 'You're Sharon's daughter. How are we going to handle this?' It stunned me. You accepted me from day one. I will proudly be in your wedding party if you'll allow me to call you Mom." I watched as the 3 of them hugged. It was wonderful to see Susan literally jump out of bed. When things settled down, I pulled out the gifts and handed them each a signed first edition of my book, with the message, "To one of the 2 prettiest ladies who call me Dad, with love, Jason Blackstone or Paul Earl Carlson." Susan was ecstatic when she unwrapped it. It was my biggest book yet, over 600 pages. Her face glowed with pride, knowing it wasn't released yet. She flipped open the cover, saw my note, and then lost it. "Dad, you've already done so much. I didn't need this," she sobbed, running into my arms. "Before you came into my life, the hospital staff said I had only a few days left. Sandra knew it too. I don't know why she went into the attic, but I'm glad she did because it brought us you." She hugged me tightly, and Sandra watched us for a few seconds. "Dad, you should know. Dr. Proctor believes if Susan had only gotten 1 transplant, it wouldn't have worked. The double transplant shocked her body into responding. In the last 6 days, she's gained 10 pounds, Sandra explained. I didn't know if you would come, but you didn't hesitate. You brought a tribe. Thanks to the family, I'm getting my best friend back." "How's your mom holding up?" I asked, trying to change the tone. "She's filed for divorce and is going to therapy to deal with a lifetime of lies. She now understands what you went through and is ashamed," Susan said. "She says only someone who has experienced it can understand that it's a living hell. Her work and friends are her support. Mom is strong and will get through it. The key will be getting her to trust again. Right now she doesn't know who or what to believe. Sandra, even with family support, it can take years to regain trust. It requires an unexpected act of faith. For me, it was Sandra walking through my office door," I said. "Thank God you did. Paul had me believing I'd die an old maid waiting for him," Jackie added with humor. "Now, girls, stand by your father so I can capture a few photos. The best one will be an 8x10 for his desk." When we stepped off the plane, we were surprised by Jackie's parents and children there to greet us. The kids nearly knocked me down with their excitement, which spread to all of us. My dad enjoyed hearing them call me Dad. I realized Timothy would have 2 older sisters and 1 younger, just like me. Tammy hugged my mom and said, I'm glad you're becoming my grandmother. I reflected on how quickly my life was changing with unexpected blessings. Jackie and I decided to shelve our pre-Sandra plans until after the wedding. Jackie knew our needs, so I let her handle finding a new home. This gave me time to write my first fiction book. My previous works exposed corruption and cover-ups. We stayed in touch with the twins, and Jackie found a 20-acre property with a barn needing repair. Susan was improving and returned to school part-time. We had a firm design our house with steel and brick, including an outdoor kitchen, large patio, pool, and a 4-bay garage. Jackie's reduced office time let me work harder, with an editor from my publisher helping. I wrote over 300 pages, publishing my first book under my real name. Sharon used my lawyer to divorce Arnold, securing alimony and education costs. My cases were in mediation as they lost the will to fight. Tammy, Timothy, Jackie, and I awaited the twins' arrival after their last school day. Timothy saw them driving up our new driveway. We all went outside to greet them. As they stepped out of the Explorer, I realized Susan's recovery was so remarkable I couldn't tell her from Sandra. Jackie whispered, "We'll figure it out." Timothy, playing big brother, carried their luggage as Jackie showed off the house. In my office, 3 copies of my latest book, Unexpected Blessings, sat on my desk. It was a fictionalized story of us,